Welcome. We're still coming to you live from the Results Operations Center here in Midrand, at Galaka Estate, and I'm still getting reactions from different political parties. And this morning, we're focusing particularly on the new entries on this year's elections. And joining us right now from Build One South Africa is the deputy leader, Nobunto Webster. Nobunto, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, and thank you for having us. We're good.
Pleasure. So ours. First and foremost, I think the focus on this year's election, before I get to BOSA, particularly, has been about the IEC and how they've been running this year's elections. We are at the business end of things. There's a lot of objections. What's BOSA's position on the IEC thus far?
Look, there have been some glitches. We're very well aware of that. We ourselves had some of our party agents' reports coming in on the day of voting with glitches. They were reported to the IEC. Most of them were resolved. We also know there's been, some objections that have come up from other parties, and we've also seen, that there have been some issues, some significant issues that have come up. But from our perspective as BOSA, we say that there's a threshold, for free and fair elections. Free and fair elections are not about perfect elections. And from our engagements with observers, for instance, our engagements with our own party agents, and with the process, having watched the process closely, we're comfortable to say that these have been free and fair elections. We're comfortable to accept the outcome. And for us, what's most important now is starting the work of building and the work of governing.
And I think we can now focus on, Build One South Africa. First time entries are currently sitting at 0.4%, almost 98.08 of all the VDs, have been completed. I'm sure coming into these elections, you had ambitions, you had your own projections, and ultimately had ambitions again of what kind of role you'd be playing when all is said and done, and the negotiations doing the rounds amongst political parties. How are you reacting to these results right now, and compared to your own projections, how have you fared?
Look, we had expectations, like you say, we had our own projections, and so we would have liked to have done better. We expected to have done better, but what we are happy about is that we have a voice in the room. So what's important for us now is it is certain that we go into Parliament. We'll have one or two seats in Parliament. That's important. We may have representation in Gauteng. That's important, and we've got to do with that everything we can. We've got to take the mandate that our constituencies have given us and do what we can with that. We have to make sure that we show South Africans that we're here. This is what we're about. This is the change that we can bring. This is the difference that we can bring. That's what's important for us now. And that's why we say, even now, we're ready to get on with the work, and to trust and believe the will of the people.
A lot has been said about, coalitions. The big C word has been doing the rounds in these elections. Looking at your numbers, what role does BOSA see itself playing in this trade game that will be unfolding in the next couple of weeks?
For us, this shouldn't be a trade game. For us, this should be about how do we get together, put the people of South Africa first. I mean, our leader has said that most important is for the leaders of the 12 parties to come together and rather have that conversation, a conversation that is about how do we put the people of South Africa first, the 61 million people of South Africa first as parties. How do we come from a place of maturity in building together now? That's what's important for us now. Shouldn't be about horse trading, shouldn't be about positions, should be about how do we make this work. It is not the simplest of situations that we've been dealt when we look at the results. But we have to make that work, and we have to make sure it works for the people of South Africa.
And the big story of these elections is obviously the MK, new entries like yourselves. What do you make of them?
The MK is a variant of the ANC, like the EFF. And that's the part that's disappointing in this election. That essentially what you see at the top is you have the opposition, which actually, when you look at it, the official opposition, the former official opposition of South Africa, where when you look at it really hasn't essentially grown, because when you look at what the ANC has done, you would have expected that they would grow, which means that they're not really the country's chosen voice of opposition. Gives us an opportunity as all the newer parties to say, how do we come together to really, really start to represent that opposition voice? But then you've got ANC, EFF, MK, all variants of the ANC, all different expressions of the same thing. If we say we're tired of a corrupt government, we've literally just put them back. And that is what's disappointing. It means this is work that we're going to have to do to fight that in Parliament.
And with what you're saying right now, does this mean if coalition talks do happen, BOSA would lead more on the quote unquote moonshot pact democratic alliance, probably?
It's certainly too early to speak about that. It's certainly too early to say who would we work with. But what is important is to know that what we won't work with, we will not work with corrupt individuals. And so even if we work with any of the parties where there are corrupt individuals, what we will insist on is that people who have been named are corrupt, people who have allegations against them, people who are being investigated are people we don't want to work with. That's what we care about.
Who would you consider corrupt officials?
Those that have been named. Those that have been named in reports, those that are being investigated, where there is processes right now legally that are investigating them, all those names. And so those are people, even if we engage with the party, what's important to us is that those individuals should not be part of a coalition.
You mentioned that one of the positives for BOSA in this year's election is you're going to have representation in the National Assembly, in Parliament. What are going to be some of the first key priorities for BOSA to tackle once they make their way into Parliament?
Look, we ran our campaign on a job in every home. But the reality is that you don't get to put a job in every home when you don't have efficient government, when you don't have ethical and credible government. So we have to make sure that issues of corruption are dealt with. That's going to be one of the priorities. We have to make sure that we do that. We have to make sure that issues of efficient government are dealt with, that we have enough in place in the form of legislation, in the form of institutions that are held to account to ensure that that happens. That's going to be a priority for us.
And just lastly, a message to those that went out to the polls to cast their vote for BOSA, relatively untested political party babies, in the political sphere of South Africa. What would you like to say to them?
Thank you for believing. Thank you for believing in One South Africa. Thank you for believing in the new. Thank you for believing in a different kind of politics and in a progressive South Africa, the kind of South Africa that we want to see. We are committed to, with what you gave us and what you've entrusted us with, making the most of it, making sure that you feel represented, making sure that you feel like your voice and what you want for this country is fought for.
Going to leave it there.
Thank you.
That was Nobunto Webster, deputy leader of Build One South Africa, just giving us their reactions. 98.08% of the voting districts being completed and where they are standing at the current moment. Going to leave it here. We'll see you after this.